Thanks for joining us on Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman. Here's what we're looking at. Mayor Johnson pledges to fight back after the Trump administration denies a disaster relief request for Chicago residents. Health concerns over abandoned oil wells that could cost Illinois taxpayers over $1 billion in cleanup. The Chicago Reader returns after a short hiatus.
Run to the grocery store, make a trip to the hardware store. Buy a new car? Not so fast. Not on Sunday.
And we explain why you can't buy a car in Illinois on Sunday. First off tonight, as officials in Indiana continue to woo the Chicago Bears to their side of the state line, and Illinois lawmakers are reportedly nearing a deal to bring the team to suburban Arlington Heights, Mayor Brandon Johnson still maintains the Bears belong here.
More people visiting the city of Chicago than we've seen. Our airport is busier than it's ever been, so the economic vibrancy in our city is strong. And to your point about those two locations, Hammond, Arlington Heights, they ain't Chicago.
And today, the city of Portage, Indiana entered the chat, saying it has a perfect location on its north side. Portage mayor saying on social media, quote, "It's a place where the highway, the train, and Lake Michigan all come together, and it's positioned to become one of the most advanced destination concepts in the world." Mayor Austin Bonta says it's planning a news conference tomorrow to share more details. And mark your calendars. Early voting for the state's March primary starts as soon as this Thursday if you're heading to the city's downtown supersite location this year with a new address.
There's more space than our old site. We have 80 voting machines and we have more prepared. Primary elections, while we see a little bit of lower turnout, we're ready for as many voters as we can have. When it comes to our voting machines, though, there is not any major changes. We are really business as normal.
The Chicago Board of Elections says it's in the process of testing voting machines at the new supersite location at 137 South State Street at Adams, meaning it is no longer at the Secretary of State building at Clark and Lake. The new site opens this Thursday at 9 a.m. Early voting opens at one location in all 50 wards on March 2nd. Up next, the city is fighting to bring disaster relief to affected residents right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by the Alexandra and John Nichols family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
Mayor Brandon Johnson is once again vowing to fight the Trump administration, this time after the federal government rejected a disaster relief request for Chicago residents still struggling to recover from severe storms last summer. Here's the mayor at a City Hall news conference earlier today.
We're going to push back, obviously, and yeah, it's unfortunate that this administration has shown so much animus towards working people, but I'm going to use every single tool that's available to me to protect our people in our city, but to ensure that we receive our fair share from the federal government, particularly when these families desperately need relief as quickly as possible.
And our Heather Sharon joins us now to break down this latest point of conflict between Chicago and the federal government. Heather, remind us what happened in August.
It was a very stormy month, and for some people on the city's southwest side, their houses flooded twice in 3 weeks as part of a severe storm that sent a deluge of rainwater into the city sewer system, overwhelming them, sending raw sewage into their basements and first floor, and forcing them to struggle to make their houses livable again.
Yeah, very big mess there. The mayor wasn't the only elected official, though, to criticize the decision by the Trump administration.
He was not. Governor J.B. Pritzker called it a, quote, new low for the president and said it was politically motivated. Cook County Board President Tony Preckwinkle accused the federal government of turning their back on some of the people who need help the most. Now, to be clear, Illinois wasn't the only state to be hit by these storms, but the president approved disaster declarations for Alaska, Nebraska, North Dakota. As he pointed out on social media, those 3 states voted for him in the 2020 and 2024 elections. Illinois, Vermont, and Maryland, who had their disaster requests rejected, did not.
Okay. It used to be routine for presidents to approve a governor's request for disaster assistance in cases like these. What does the Trump administration have to say?
Well, they say they reviewed these requests carefully and they wanted to make sure that tax dollars was used appropriately. They say responding to disasters is the responsibility of states, not the federal government. But this is clearly another instance where President Trump has not shied away from publicly using his power as president to reward those he sees as his political friends and punish his political opponents. And of course, Illinois and Chicago has long been at the top of that list.
What can Illinois elected officials do now?
Well, the mayor said he's going to continue working with the city's congressional delegation. Perhaps there's some money that can be stuck in a bill somewhere along the line. And I guess the city and the state could try to sue the federal government, but it's not clear the city has any recourse since this is a presidential decision and may not be subject to judicial oversight.
Okay. Heather Sharon, thanks so much.
Thanks, Brandis.
And you can read Heather's full story on our website. It's all at WTTW.com/news. Illinois taxpayers could be on the hook for more than $1 billion due to tens of thousands of unplugged oil wells at risk of abandonment across the state. A new report from Northwestern University says those unplugged wells could wreak environmental havoc, leaking toxic chemicals into groundwater. Joining us to break down that report is Robert Weinstock, director of the Environmental Advocacy Center at Northwestern University's School of Law. We also invited the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, who declined, as well as the Illinois Oil and Gas Association, which did not respond. Robert, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So your report found that the Illinois Department of Natural Resources tracks over 30,000 oil wells in Illinois that will eventually need to be capped and plugged appropriately. What are the dangers of leaving those wells unplugged?
Thanks. So an unplugged oil well really creates three categories of environmental hazard. First, many of these wells leak methane, which is an incredibly potent greenhouse gas, fueling climate change and contributing to the extreme wet weather events we see in Illinois, just like this was just featured on the program. Second, wells can leak contamination into groundwater. And in downstate Illinois, many of our residents get their drinking water in their homes from private wells on their land, right from the same groundwater aquifers that these wells can be leaking all sorts of carcinogenic and other toxic chemicals into. And then finally, some of the pollution from these wells can leak directly into the soil. And in southern Illinois, you're talking about really productive agricultural soil that can be fouled by the contamination from these wells, causing it to be worthless as the farmland it is and could be.
What do these unplugged wells look like? And it sounds like you're saying many of them, most of them are in downstate Illinois. Where are they?
That's right. They're heavily concentrated in southeastern Illinois.
And what do they look like if I'm driving through southeastern Illinois, what would I see?
Yeah, I mean, it really ranges, and that was one of the things that surprised me in doing this research. Sometimes it is sort of that iconic oil derrick that you might imagine in the Southern California skyline or something like that, sort of with the
oil jack that sort of bobs.
That's
yes.
right. Other times, it's just a pipe sticking out of the ground. Many times it's that pipe, which is the actual top of the boring, along with all sorts of equipment or infrastructure left over from the oil drilling. That might be tanks, that might be small pipelines running out, that could be actual waste pits itself. It really varies quite a bit from site to site.
So in 2025, official records identified over 6,000 wells as requiring immediate closure, but you find that the majority of Illinois' 30,000 plus wells are currently tracked or likely at high risk of abandonment. Why is there this discrepancy between the official records and what your report has found?
So our report is based entirely on IDNR records, and what we did was we looked at it in different ways. So that 6,000 number actually is sort of two buckets combined. It's one group of about 4,000 wells which have been formally orphaned. So the state can't find the entities that are responsible for cleaning them up. They've been abandoned by the oil companies that drilled them in the first place. 2,000 more of those wells, the state has identified a permit holder, so someone who is supposed to be legally responsible for the cleanup. They've sent that person a citation saying, it looks like your well is inactive and time to be closed, and that person hasn't responded, hasn't acted on that to fulfill that legal obligation. 30,000 is the entire set of wells that the state tracks in its through its permit program. And the state itself says more than half of those are producing about a barrel or a barrel and a half of oil a day at most, which makes them economically unproductive. So what are they doing still unclosed if they're not producing useful oil? I would also say there's another number that's in the report that's really important, which is 155,000. That's the number of wells that the state estimates have been drilled in Illinois throughout the history of the oil industry. That number is really important because those old wells, they don't even track them. So there's 120,000 wells out there that the state can't even tell you where they are, when they stop producing oil, or if they're properly closed or need to be remediated further.
And of course, we know the state of Illinois is not producing oil the way it did years past when 155,000 wells were dug over time.
Oil production's certainly down. We're still the 16th largest oil producing state in the country, and we still do produce useful oil products from some of these wells. The problem is that trend line. It's less and less. Meanwhile, all these older wells are sitting there with the potential for such extreme environmental and public health impacts, and the companies, some of which are there, others are disappearing day by day.
Many of them, like you said, they've been, abandoned by owners. What does it mean for a well to become abandoned, and who becomes responsible? Because it costs to clean it up, to cap it, and to close that well off. So who should be responsible for this?
Well, state law is actually quite clear that the people and the companies that drill those wells are responsible for closing them at the end of their useful life, closing them and cleaning up the site. However, many companies, certainly not all, but many simply walk away from their obligations. In other states, there's been documented cases where larger companies have sort of taken a well that's no longer really making any money, sold it to a small company that they know is going to go bankrupt, and that small company then declares bankruptcy, leaving the well cleanup to go to the state. And that's really that orphan well program I mentioned before is the state's way to deal with that. Unfortunately, it's wildly underfunded. Most of the work done in that orphan well program has been done using limited federal funds that come from all of our taxpayer dollars.
Your report also shows difficulty tracking a lot because of data collection. How does Illinois compare to other states?
Yeah, this is one of the most remarkable things I think we found is that Illinois is an absolute laggard when it comes to simple data collection, and you compare that nationwide. So in any other state that produces significant quantities of oil, you can go on a publicly available website. Largely, there's interactive websites where you can say, that seems to be a well on my property. Who owns it? How much oil is it producing? When was it drilled? In Illinois, none of that data, first of all, the production data isn't collected at all, and much of those other pieces you'd have to go through and put in a formal records request to the agency and get that data. Why is that such a big problem, that lack of production data tracking? Because that's the easiest way to tell if a well is no longer producing oil, is just to ask. And the agency doesn't do that. The agency it sends inspectors out routinely. Sometimes they spot old wells, but they don't do the very simple thing of requiring the producer simply to tell them how much oil are you producing. And then when those reports stop coming in, the agency would know it's no longer producing. Let's go shut it down.
What are the steps that this state has taken so far to mitigate some of the dangers of these unplugged wells?
Well, so as I mentioned, the state, the Illinois Department of Natural Resources has done a really great job in going out and getting federal funding that was available under the Biden infrastructure law, the bipartisan infrastructure law passed under President Biden. They've received that money, they're spending it. They are using that to plug a limited number of wells that they can with those proceeds, with the revenues from the federal taxpayer dollars. That's great. What they need to do is take these other steps laid out in our report to actually prevent wells from becoming orphaned in the first place, to make sure the companies that profited from them actually pay to close them, and then to create a system whereby we know that the oil industry, through permit fees, through bonds that are appropriately set, that actually match cleanup costs, will be the one paying for the mess that they made.
Okay, that's where we'll have to leave it. I'll be curious to see how the state responds based on this report going forward. Robert Weinstock, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Up next, the new editor-in-chief of the Chicago Reader on her vision for the future. A new era of the Chicago Reader is here. The city's most recognizable alternative newspaper has focused on arts, culture, and investigations since its founding in 1971. But a few years of financial hardship put the paper on a brief hiatus last December until now. The Reader has a new leader who says they are here to stay. Joining us to discuss the Reader's new direction is the paper's new editor-in-chief, Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative journalist Sarah Conway. Welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
Congrats on the gig.
Thank you so much.
So tell us about the Reader's first edition back. We've got the cover here. New egg, who dis? I love that. It's very, very Reader.
Thank you.
Say more.
Thank you. We wanted to come back with a splash. We are a 50-year-plus publication. And we moved from publishing weekly to publishing a print monthly magazine. So we're going to be at over 600 locations across the city every first Wednesday of the month. And we are now a print monthly newspaper, which means that we are going to be bringing you features, investigations, a culture curated calendar called Reader Radar, which is full of events from like civic things you should be involved in to concerts, plays, movies, film events that should be on your radar that we really want Chicagoans to see, to get out and participate in the city. The Reader in many ways is still its classic self. We're still bringing you criticism, reviews, and news about what's going on in the city, but our print monthly is really going to be something that we want as sort of this analog paper product to literally live in your home. We want it to be something that readers can really sit with, and I think all the buzz that goes on, that we're all living on social media and a digital life, and to have a product that we're not giving up on. We still see value in having a print publication. And
in this new edition that just came out last week, what are some of the stories that folks can read about in the latest?
My favorite, I'll share with you a couple of my favorite stories. There's a lot of really great content. I think we have an amazing editorial staff, our writers and our editors. Some of them have been at the paper for decades. And I personally am so proud to be a part of a publication that has an intergenerational staff that is from all over the city and is really making a vested interest to be more representative of Chicago. Like, we want to be a publication that is truly a city paper, that you see yourselves in our pages. Some of my favorite stories, I would say Katie Prout is a features writer we have. She's doing a series, it's called Just Neighbors, that's going to be looking at the city's complex interdepartmental process at dismantling encampments. And Katie really wants to show the human light that those policies have on people experiencing homelessness in the city. And that's going to be an ongoing series we have. We also started a new series that is an accountability series about the Quantum Campus. It's done by a contributor named Gray Lucas. And our first story in that series is really looking at community perspectives of this mega development that we know acquired many tax dollars from the state. And has many different people and entities coming to the space. So that's another feature that is also just extremely, the layout is so beautiful. We have really talented art people on staff. And then we also looked at a program that was sunset from the Poetry Foundation, was the adult poetry program, and kind of taking a look at like the human impact of closing these programs and the ways that people participated in them. So those are three stories. And also to shout out, it was the launch of our first calendar, like our events calendar, the Reader Radar. So that's another thing to look out in the print product of
which I know is very exciting, of course. So, coming back to print, first Wednesday of every month, but we know journalism, and print journalism in particular, been taking some hits. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution discontinuing print at the end of last year. Why do you think it's important to maintain a print presence? And, how do we get the viewers, the readers, the listeners to come back?
So I think print is very important for a few reasons. One, I think that print is also about accessibility. Not everyone can read or access digital news. And I think that we also have this flurry of digital information, and I think having a print product that we distribute throughout the city, that we're going to expand distribution beyond the 600 plus sites that we have currently, is a way we can make sure that Chicagoans can access news, particularly city news. I think secondly that it's really important to maintain in this digital age, as we, the rise of AI, like the ever, present attention-grabbing things from social media, that we have print things, that people can have physical media that they can keep in their home, that they can sit with and really, take time to understand. And so that's really what we want our print publication to do, is to be something you have in your home that you're using as a guide to understand the city and for things that you physically pass on to others. But we are still very much a digital newsroom. We publish stories daily, and we're going to be expanding that coverage this year. We're going to be leaning into doing more news and political coverage, as well as investigations and features as part of, I would say, the footprint of the Reader online.
So we know that the Chicago Reader been around, as you said, for more than half a century. It's had its own years recently of some financial turmoil, changing ownership at one point, imminent risk of closure, but you're under new ownership now. You've got Noisy Creek. Tell us a little bit about that company and how, you and they sort of work together to deliver what we all know is alternative journalism in Chicago.
I think this is very interesting. I see myself as a local journalist. Like, I love local news, and I'm very vested in local news because I think news is so important in our society. It is like one of the entities that protects the public and I think shines a light on things. And so Noisy Creek is a network of alt newspapers. Right now it is the Chicago Reader, the Portland Mercury, and the Seattle Stranger. So it's been very interesting to be part of a company that's a national company, but it is really like a constellation of alt newspapers that eventually is going to be like syndicating news between them. And so Noisy Creek's approach is it's a decentralized model. We have these autonomous alt papers, which I think is very much in the legacy of what the Reader is. Like, the Reader is, like this weird, strange, and I think in a lot of ways subversive newspaper that's been around for 50 plus years in Chicago, and it means so much to people. It's like one of those papers that I think about my own relationship to it. It was really the first place that I read literary journalism, that I saw investigations that were looking at things in a slightly different way than I would say traditional news looks at them. But also, my old landlord, she grew up, she was a teenager when the Reader came out, and so you have these whole generations of people, even within a family, that see this publication, have a relationship with it. And I think the thing I really value about Noisy Creek is that they are invested in keeping the Reader alive, that they see that alt newspapers are a critical part of American life, of civic life, and that they should exist, and really creating a model that's more sustainable that they can.
Before we let you go, 600 locations. Where can one get a physical copy of the Reader?
So our locations are across universities in the city, coffee shops. We also are in libraries. So probably many of the civic spaces that are in your neighborhood that you love, you can also go to chicagoreader.com and look up the map to find an exact spot.
There you go.
And grab you a copy. We have our March Best of Chicago issue coming up first Wednesday of March.
And readers know where to find it.
Yes.
Sarah Conway, congrats. Thank you so
you.
much. Best of luck.
Thank you.
Up next, we explain why buying a car on Sunday is a no-go. It is that time of the year again. Whether you are in the market for a new car or are just an auto enthusiast, the Chicago Auto Show is happening right now through Monday at McCormick Place. Now, if you happen to get inspired to buy a new vehicle, remember though, in Illinois, you can't do that on a Sunday. Nick Blumberg has the story in this edition of our series, WTTW News Explains.
Ah, the weekend. The perfect time to knock a few items off the old to-do list. Run to the grocery store, make a trip to the hardware store. Buy a new car? Not so fast. Not on Sunday. Since the 1980s, it's been illegal for car dealerships to operate on Sundays in Illinois. Why? Well, some owners and employees wanted to shut down to spend time with their families or for religious reasons. But, and pay attention, this is the key. They didn't want their competitors to be open and have a chance to steal business. The first attempts to close down dealerships on Sundays date back to the 50s and 60s, but those laws never made it off the lot. They were vetoed or struck down in the courts. But since 1984, Illinois car dealers must close their doors on Sundays. Illinois isn't alone. A dozen other states don't allow Sunday car sales either. It's a vestige of so-called blue laws barring certain activities on the basis of religion, like, say, buying a sports car on the Sabbath. The religious angle is one reason Illinois' ban has been challenged multiple times. One alternate proposal still restricted car sales to 6 days a week, but allowed dealerships to pick which day they take off, since, for example, Jews and Muslims don't observe a day of rest and prayer on Sundays. Some pro-business groups argue the law restricts free commerce, but so far, Illinois has kept the Sunday car sale ban on the books and would-be test drives off the roads. So if you're looking for a hot deal on a new set of wheels, you'll have to look on another day.
You can see more from our WTTW News Explained series on our website. And that's our show for Tuesday night. Join us tomorrow night at 5:30 and 10. Congress members are at odds over how to reform the Department of Homeland Security as a funding deadline looms. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm and sponsor of programming that offers continuing education to fellow legal practitioners in Illinois.